This week, inshallah, we will address the point on the life of Amirul Mu'mineen Uthman Dhun Nurayn radiyallahu an. Uthman radiyallahu an was Amirul Mu'mineen after the Sahibain, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and that of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an. He was a real inspiration, not only to the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, but also to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was amongst those elite, chosen individuals who the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had a special position for in his heart. Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu an, he was born, according to the historians, 5 to 6 years after the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he wasn't very old in comparison to the Prophet. We find Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, he embraces Islam. Then we find Ali karramallahu wajha embraces Islam. Then we find Zayd ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu embraces Islam. The fourth in the list of those people who embraced Islam is none else than Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. Uthman radiyallahu an, he was from the lineage and the tribe of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was amongst the Quraysh. His maternal grandmother was actually the twin sister of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam's father, Abdullah. So his maternal grandmother was the twin sister of the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So again, there was family relationships with the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What did he look like? What do the books of Tariq tell us about the features of this great Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu? He was not too tall, he was not too short, he was medium in stature. He was very, very handsome. Uthman radiyallahu anhu was very handsome. And his complexion was a tinge of red. In the books of Tariq, talk about a tinge of red. And he had a few spots known as small dots around his face. Uthman radiyallahu anhu had this. And he had a very large, lengthy beard, which covered most of his bosom area. Uthman radiyallahu anhu, his physique was large in complexion, in the sense that his hands, his limbs were complete and they were broad. He had broad shoulders and he had a plump in his shank. In other words, he was quite muscular, Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. So he was medium in height, red in complexion with a few spots on his face. He was quite broad, his shoulders were broad, full in muscle. And his arms were, we get at times people who have very less hair. Uthman radiyallahu an, his arms, and the upper his arms were covered in hair. His hair was slightly curly, but towards the front of his head, and in his later years, we find when he became a grown man and he became a Sahabi radiyallahu an, he had a sort of a bald area at the front of his forelock. Uthman radiyallahu an, when he would smile, his teeth would become very visible. His teeth were very visible. He had a habit of using the siwak. He had a strong habit of using the siwak, and his teeth were complete. So when he would smile, they would be radiant and you'd be able to clearly tell him. And his hair would it was a zulfa. So it would come to his earlobe or lower. That was the range of his hair. So a lengthy beard with a zulfa upon his head. He had a tooth which was gold plated, which was due to some sort of dental issue. So in overall, the reason I explain this is because to give you a depiction of Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. He was very much opposite Amirul Mu'mineen Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Pre-Islamically, Uthman radiyallahu anhu was a very successful businessman. Uthman was a very successful businessman. He had his own orchards, his own gardens, he had his own enterprise. Large caravans would leave Al-Makkah al-Mukarramah towards Syria and towards Sham and towards other countries. And these caravans would belong to Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu. In today's climate and today's understanding, if you think about it like this, when you go on the motorway, you see large haulage large lorries going to distances with products. This was how it was at the time of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. He was very, very wealthy. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, he owned many of the gardens of Medina. Later on, of course, he lived in Makkah initially, and he owned many of the orchards, gardens, wells of the city of Al-Makkatul Mukarramah.